Business that's fueled by passion, you're always balancing the head from the heart. If you really want to learn the history of America, you first have to learn the history of its food. Modern Marvels is back. Join me at which I'll give you an exclusive inside look as I explore the huge factory with small mom and pop shops, creating America's most iconic food one bite at a time. Modern Marvels. Just Sunday, first at 10, right here on the History Channel. What kind of stuff does she have? You rock one? Right. Great stuff. Not just anytime and see me. The History Channel original series, American Bakers, featuring Monday at 9, right here on the History Channel. You like Bud? Go with it. You like snow? Starting off the year with new resolutions, Tom. Well, sorry for ruining your plans. The PG Baby Shoot. More bacon, more cheese, and way less problems. Your way, way better. It's Nestor. As a urologist, I've seen it all. What's some men in so if you're a normal business, you have an advantage. We should talk. It would be or safety. Condition involves a big start issue. Don't wait. Find a urologist. Diagnose it. It's time to pick up the January sale on the Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed to help with snoring. I've never heard before. And done. Now $6,000 on the Sleep Number 360 Special Edition Smart Bed. Now $17.99. Eve is a great driver, and she deserves car insurance that puts her in control. Her route insurance bases rates primarily on how you drive. Your braking, your turning, how much you drive, or how little. Your driving is the number one factor we use to keep better driving. Learn more at joinroute.com.
Todd, how we doing?
Good, Joe. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Kelly, we have quorum.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Today is January 21st. This is our first policy meeting of 2021. Welcome, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. We'll call this meeting to order. Item number 2 is a vote on approval of the agenda. I have a motion.
This is Connie. I'll move it.
Second, Stephanie.
All right. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 3 is vote on the approval of the meeting minutes from December. Any questions about it or discussion?
Move to approve. This is Ruth.
Second.
Second, Vern Willie.
You scared me.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 4 is consent and vote on the approval of the financial statement. Todd, you want to give us a brief overview of it?
Yeah, we have November and December's financial statements that were sent out to you the other day. Just our normal expenses, nothing out of the ordinary on those. Yeah, I'd recommend approval, but happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Todd? All right, this is a voting item. I would love to have a motion.
Motion, Stephanie.
Second, this Ruth.
All right, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 5 is the part of the meeting where we have any public comment on any MPO actions. Is there anyone from the public? Now's the time to raise your hand, and we will address your concerns or comments. Tracy, do we have anybody on the line from the public?
Don't believe we do. No.
I hear none. I will move on to item 6. It's a presentation from the Central Iowa Transportation from Todd. Todd, you're going to give us a brief update before Luke jumps in from United Way?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Over the past year or so, the MPO has been working with on the United Way, Community Foundation, DART, the Greater Des Moines Partnership, and some other partners on looking at Central Iowa transportation analysis that looked at access to the transportation system and barriers that might exist, and how to best start working on some solutions to those barriers. And so went through a long process and had a consultant that helped develop this report. And Luke is going to kind of run through some of the findings of the report. So I'll turn it over to Luke.
Thanks, Todd, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Luke Lynch, and I see a lot of familiar faces. It's nice to be here with you. Also have to share, for those of you that might be confused, I have an identical twin brother who I think some of you work with often. He does economic development here in the community. So just wanted to make sure there's no confusion there, as there often is, and it's fine if there is. Anyways, I just want to share a little bit about this study this research that was, as you see there, put on by Compendium is the firm that we worked with, commissioned by those folks that you see there and that Todd just mentioned. So we'll move on to the next slide there. This was a 4-phase project, and I'm going to focus mainly on phase 3 today, but just want to talk a little bit about phase 1 and phase 2. And those were mainly just conversations with stakeholders, health and human services agencies, focus groups, transportation providers, just figuring out what information's out there, what services are out there, and where might there be some overlap. Onto the next slide, we'll talk about phase 3, and there were really 2 parts to this part, and one was a qualitative in-depth to get an understanding there, and then to validate that with a quantitative study. On the next slide, we see those who are in need of transportation in our community and who we identified as in need. So single moms, mentally or physically disabled persons, refugees and New Iowans, seniors. The ALICE population, which stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed, or those making under 250% of the poverty level. And then we added on rural residents, kids, and returning citizens. So phase 1, or I guess the first step of this, the qualitative part of this, was there were 40 total participants, 20 in-depth interviews, and this was conducted by Compendium, a lot of really in-depth, time-consuming interviews with these folks. And Compendium walked away from this, and I was just talking to somebody from Compendium the other day, that these interviews really stuck with them. And these are things that they think of, meeting with these people who are in need, have really stuck with those folks. So I just want to share a little bit about the stories here, and I've removed names, I've removed pictures, because you'll see there in that box there that these were just for the folks who were in on the reports. We did not get sign off to share the names or pictures, but I hope that this helps put in perspective what the challenges are for some of those groups in our community. So ALICE was the first group that I'm going to talk about. We know that the Jill, this person that we interviewed, she's a single mom with 3 kids, ages 2, 3, and 10, and she lives with her sister. She's resourceful. She'll take any form of transportation, but it's challenging with car seats, time, and money is challenging as well. She really likes Uber because she knows when it's coming, and she can see the rating in the photo of the driver. Her priorities are price, and then time, and then convenience with car seat availability. On to the next one, we have the senior citizen. And what we know about Jane is that she really enjoys riding the bus, but her oxygen prohibits her from taking the bus because there's not enough supply, and she just doesn't have enough time to be, and then to lug the oxygen as well. But she does like the bus, and she made friends. You can see there, and there is a theme here, that a lot of people really enjoy their cars or would like to have a car. The next one is the new Iowan or single mom. So Mary here is a Spanish-speaking, not a resident, 2 young kids with disabilities. She lives in a duplex on the south side of Des Moines, and there are no bus stops near her. So it's hard to transport her daughter with a special needs chair and baby in a car seat. She has very limited money and no way to get ahead, and wants to attend school and get a job. And I think that's a cycle that we see throughout all of the work of United Way and many on this call, is that poverty is a cycle. It's not just one area. So I think that stresses why this was an important study to do. Her needs, she's interested in getting basic supplies, diapers, formula, medications, and groceries. And the last one I'll highlight is the returning citizen. So somebody coming back into society from incarceration. I think the one that sticks out to me here is that Andrew passed up 2 jobs because the bus didn't run there. And we see the transportation as a big issue coming up for folks coming back into society, and something we were actually able to help change a couple years ago up at the State House, so that folks who are re-entering society and had non-driving related offenses that were able to get their driver's license before leaving, because oftentimes folks get out, they're expected to get a job. How do they get to their job? They get in a car and then they just risk getting in trouble again. But also funding coming out with so much court debt is an issue there. So that's just a quick overview of the qualitative in-depth, and I'm going to jump next into the quantitative side. So you'll see here we did over, and by we I mean Compendium, I didn't have a part in this. There were over 1,200 completed responses. So we did both online and phone study. And then on the next slide, you'll see we had a good representation of Polk, Dallas, and Warren counties. And then even into those areas that I mentioned above, the senior citizens, New Iowans, single mothers, ALICE, returning citizens, etc. Next, I'm going to jump into a lot of I'm going to get a little bit into the weeds in some of this, and I'm happy to share these. And you guys, I don't know if you have these already that were sent out to you, but I'm happy to share them. What really stood out to me and a lot of others on this slide is that when you break it down, 96% of the people that we contacted identified transportation as a problem. And so we contacted folks under living 250% of the poverty level and less. So it really is, we know that this is a need. We know that we need to focus time on this. And so this survey, I think this validates the survey and then hopefully what comes from it. And the next slide, you'll see just a breakdown of the severity of problems. So we have the minor problem, and I'm sorry that I don't know if you can see the whole slide there, but we have in blue, it's the transportation of a minor problem. In green, it's a medium problem. In purple, it's a big problem. And in yellow, it's a very big problem. And you can see we broke that down into Polk, Dallas, Warren, and then the Alice population into the other populations as well. On the next slide, we just see how frequent is it a problem? You know, is it a problem for 96% or 96% of the people one time a year? And we found that that answer is no. For 14% of those folks, it's multiple times a day. 38% is daily. And so you can see on down there that transportation is definitely an issue. On the next slide here, just talk about the barriers. What did people identify as the barriers? The question here is, which of the following make transportation a problem for you? The majority of folks identified that it's inconvenient, and then on down the line with other things that we would think of. It's expensive, unreliable, confusing, and unsafe. On to the next slide, we just break down into Polk, Dallas, and Warren again. But we see here that folks in Dallas County tend to have the most barriers or experience the most barriers in poverty. You'll see there it's inconvenient, expensive, unreliable, on down the line. But I think the thing that stuck out on this slide is that Dallas County showed that had the most issues. This slide just indicates that, you know, it's not, people are using different types of transportation. It's not just the bus, although DART is used by the majority of people. And I guess the next slide indicates that. I got ahead of myself, but this is to show that DART is used by 1/2 of all respondents. So that's a pretty big deal. And then on down the line, you'll see there HERDA and then shuttle services, et cetera. The next slide is to show that people are not only using DART, they're using all other forms of transportation, and those are the forms that they're using. On to the next one, reasons for using DART. I think that rider surveys through DART, and I don't know if anyone from DART is on this call, but I'm told that they were not surprised to see this, that most people use DART to get to and from work. So that kind of, I think, validates that. The next set of questions were really, we just ask what are the barriers that you experience with certain modes of transportation? So expense is a barrier for taxi or ride service. The next one, we see that driving their own car, parking is the biggest problem. And on to the next slide. Yep, perfect, thank you. And then you can see the percentages, traffic, it's expensive, concern the car will break down. Experiences with DART, these are the top ones that were identified. It's inconvenient. Bus stops are too far from where I live and work. Bus stops do not provide enough shelter. Routes and schedules do not work with my needs. And I should say, I know from working, and I feel like I'm in a meeting with DART every week, I know that these are things that are top of mind to DART. And so these were highlighted in this survey, and I know that the work is being done. The next slide talks about experiences with HERDA. I think the biggest concern there was that there's too much advance notice in order to schedule a ride. And I know we're going through these real quick, but I think these probably show the best, annotate this the best. And I apologize, my dog's running around, working from home. So potential solutions. We see that convenient on-demand scheduling solves the transportation problems. So folks want quick and on-demand scheduling. Folks want to own their own vehicle, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple slides. We heard that light rail service would be was something that folks would be interested in. And then no cost red, DART on down the line. So key takeaways. The biggest takeaway, I think, is that 96% of people consider transportation as a problem. So I can't say that enough. I kind of just mentioned the impactful, the on-demand scheduling, having a car, all of those things. I think the car ownership is good, and Compendium put in that pyramid there to kind of correspond with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. at the bottom, you have the basic needs. So folks identify that more and better job opportunities would be the benefit of owning a car. They identify that making life easier would be the benefit of owning a car. Freedom, independence, and then self-esteem. So if you compare that to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you have basic needs at the bottom, psychological needs, and then self-fulfillment needs. I think what we identify here is that yes, car ownership is something that most people aspire to and would want. But when we look at that group of people owning 250 or earning 250% of the poverty level or less, we know that owning a car is average $600 a month when you add in insurance costs and maintenance costs. And so is adding a $600 cost to somebody who's already constrained, is that the best answer? And we're not saying we're looking at other solutions. We're not saying that that's not a solution, but we wanted to see what the other solutions are. And so when I say when I say we're looking at it, who are those folks? And on the next slide, you'll see that really this group of people, the folks who put this study together, said, we don't want this to be a study that just ends up on a shelf somewhere. We want some actionable items and solutions to come out of this. So I've been working with BizLab out of Ankeny on some ideation sessions, some design thinking, and to really come up with some good solutions. So we've had a group of 7 members from different parts of the community to really represent different facets of our community, come together for 6 sessions, and we've had 4 already. We have another 2 coming up starting next week. I think the really exciting thing is that we had 2 design thinking sessions where we engage people, end users and people, caseworkers who are working with end users. And we had 109 ideas and 13 initial themes that came from that. So now the group is boiling down, what are the themes? What's out there? What are other communities doing? What's being done in our community? And to come up with some interesting and different solutions. And also mention that it's, both public and private solutions. And then also, even conversations around how are cities being built and how are they being designed and what's happening, how far away is work from where people live. All of those things are happening in these conversations. So that's really all that I had, and exciting things to come. And I'd be happy to share those with you as we wrap up our Idea Lab sessions. But if you do have any questions, there's my contact information, and I would be happy to chat with you. If I don't know the answer, I know where to find it, and I will be happy to find it for you and get back to you.
Luke, thank you very much. Appreciate the comments and the information. Does anyone have any questions for Luke? All right. Easy group today, Luke.
Made it off easy. Thank you.
You bet. Thank
Have a
you.
good day.
You too. Item number 7 is report and vote on the TAP criteria and schedule. And Shiroshi's going to give us a brief update. We've seen this a few times. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So a few months ago, MPO staff began working on updating the scoring criteria for TAP applications. And really the intent of doing this update was to kind of bring the scoring criteria in line with our long-range transportation plan goals. Also to make the criteria a little bit more consistent, reduce redundancies, make it more objective, and also to improve the process and make it a little less complicated and efficient. Finally, we also proposed adding a safe routes to school category within the TAP grant process, just to make it a little bit easier for communities to apply and be able to score if they are proposing a safe routes to school project. So with those goals in mind, we looked at the existing criteria. The updated criteria is fairly similar. We did add a couple new topics or goals under the health and environmental, sustainability, and safety categories, with questions as well as criteria under each of those. Moving on, we went through a review process. The initial round of review was done by a few of the MPO committees and roundtables. As you can see here, we took quite a bit of comments and input and refined the criteria based on what we heard and came up with a final draft. That final draft was went through an additional round of review, again by the Bike Ped Roundtable and a few other committees, including the Des Moines Trails and Greenways Committee. We did not receive any additional comments or feedback from the from the second round of review. So we didn't make any additional changes to the criteria at that time. Next slide. So right now we are going through the approval process for the proposed update to the TAP scoring criteria. And we are seeking your approval today. And following the approval, we are going to open up the application process on January 22nd, which is tomorrow, with the anticipated deadline of February 26th for the applications. And once the applications are received, the rest of the TAP schedule will follow the same schedule and timeline as the STBG applications. Also, just a reminder, if communities are applying for Safe Routes to School projects and they do get funded, then they will need to apply to the state Safe Routes to School program, which is always the deadline to apply to it is on October 1st of the fiscal year that their project is programmed. So with that, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer at this time. Otherwise, we are seeking your approval to the proposed updates to the TAP scoring criteria. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiroshi. Appreciate it. Does anyone have any comments or questions?
Move approval, Hanson.
Second, Ruth.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 8 is a report on the draft 2017-2021 safety performance targets. And Z is going to take care of this one.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'll be going over our 2020 safety performance and also the 2021 safety targets. But before I go into those, I want to go into some background on the safety performance. The safety performance is part of the Federal Highway Administration's Highway Safety Improvement Program. As part of this program, state DOTs and MPOs annually report safety performance measures. These measures include the number of fatalities, the rate of fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, the number of serious injuries, the rate of serious injuries per 100 million VMT, and also the number of non-motorized fatalities and non-motorized serious injuries. As part of the program, MPOs can either agree to support their state DOT's target, or they can establish more specific targets for the MPO planning area. So based on past target setting by the MPO, we are continuing to set safety targets for the 2017 to 2021 period. Next slide, yes. Although current regulations use this term target, MPO committees have expressed that they do not approve of using this term targets when we talk about crashes, fatalities, and serious injuries. MPO committees have still approved of these targets while maintaining that this term is not appropriate in this context. Next slide. So now taking a look at our 2020 safety performance. In 2020, we had 38 recorded fatalities in the MPO area, 138 serious injuries, and 27 non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. Fatalities and non-serious injuries were a bit up from last year, while serious injuries were down from last year. Now putting these 2020 numbers within a historic context, earlier in terms of fatalities, we have been seeing a decrease in the number of fatalities, but more recently we are seeing a increase in the number of fatalities across the MPO. Next slide. However, in terms of serious injuries, we are seeing a continued decrease historically of serious injuries in the MPO. Next slide. Same thing with non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. Historically, we are seeing a downward trend in this, and we're continuing to see this as well. Next slide. So kind of putting everything together, our 2017 to 2021 safety targets are on the column on the right. In the middle is our 2020 performance, and on the column on the left is our 2015 to 2019 baseline. You'll notice that the fatality rate and also serious injury rate is to be determined. That's because we're still working with the Iowa DOT to finalize that vehicle mile travel data so we can calculate the rate. So once we have that, we'll update those rates. Next slide. So this is just a schedule of what we have done for the safety targets. In November of 2020, we reviewed our draft targets and methodology with the MPO engineering subcommittee and also with the Iowa DOT. We asked for the assistance on how to consider COVID-19 impacts on VMT. Now in January, we're reviewing our preliminary targets of the MPO committees, and we're also finalizing our 2020 crash data and VMT data into a report. So next month, we'll bring back our final targets and the report to the MPO committees for your vote and approval. If you have any questions on these safety targets, I can take them at this time.
Z, thank you. Any questions for Z? Just for the record, I know we have to do this report, but it's kind of odd that we've got to say how many people we're okay with dying or that's going to die with accidents, and we say it every single time, and it's just what our target rate is. But I know we have to do it for state and feds, but it's just a weird report we have to do. All right, we'll move on to item number 9. This is the fiscal year 2022 Unified Planning Work Program and Budget Development. Dylan.
Thank you. So it's time of year again that we develop our work program and budget. This outlines the things we're going to do over the next fiscal year. Our fiscal year starts July 1st, runs through June 30th. So we've a few months to put this together here. The process works. We are working with our member communities, working with the various committees, tech committee and policy committee to understand what projects you want to see from us. We'll develop a draft that will be brought forward in March to turn into the DOT by April 1st. Then the final version is due in June. So in May, we'll take action on the final version. If you go to the next slide, a lot of the work program touches on the requirements that are put upon us by US code. Those are outlined up there on the screen. So we have to do a work program, we have to do a long range plan, we have to do the TIP and public participation plan. A lot of the work that we do, most everything we do somehow relates to one of these requirements. It might be a study that will feed into the long range plan, for example. We have some additional requirements put upon us too, such as a congestion management process, because we are a transportation management area. We're over 200,000, that's what a TMA is. We have to administer SDBG funds and so forth. If you go to the next slide, so the work program will outline the various plans, studies, technical assistance that communities might want that we will take on in next fiscal year 2022. So that's what we're requesting input on right now. So if people have any comments now, we'd be happy to take them. But give that some thought. If there's something your community needs, or or a sub area, neighborhood, whatever it might be, please let us know and we can work that into the budget. It's easier to do it now rather than amend it later, so we can do that. We've asked this of the technical committee too, so we hopefully will hear some feedback. This will be coming back over the next couple of months. We'll convene the finance and budget subcommittee so they can take a look at the budget side of things over the next few months, so that we have their input as well when we bring everything back in March for the draft. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Dylan, thank you. Questions or comments for Dylan? All right, I hear none. We'll move to item 10 is a report on the pavement condition report from Andrew.
Yes, thank you. So the information that was used to compile this report was primarily collected in the 2019 pavement collection cycle. That collects information on all paved roads in the MPO planning area. The data that's used is point data that is aggregated up to road segments that's used to calculate a pavement condition index, or PCI. The way we calculate PCI for cities and counties had changed a little bit a few years ago. The reason for that is counties primarily have highways, which are faster in speed and require additional information on roughness, whereas cities usually have slower roads that don't really require roughness to be part of the PCI calculation. But the good news is that both of those PCIs are comparable. So the MPO has also been tracking this pavement condition information metro-wide since 2013, every other year. Next slide. In the report, which was included in your agenda packet, there is a map on the front page, but also that shows pavement condition for road segments. Also on that front page is a table, same as on the screen before you. There we can see that we utilize two different measures to look at pavement condition. One is the average pavement condition index for the region. Another is looking at the percentage of roads in poor or worse condition. We also break that out into two different timeframes. One is historic context, looking back to 2013, since the time frame we've been collecting this data, and then back to 2017, which is the basis that we used in the updated Mobilizing Tomorrow document. So since 2013, we are actually trending down a little bit, both as looking at the PCI and percentage of roads. We're 3% down in PCI since 2013, and we've seen approximately a 6% increase in the percentage of roads in poor or worse condition. However, if you look at since Mobilizing Tomorrow has continued, in 2017, we've actually seen improvement. So a 5% increase in our average PCI, and then also 1% reduction in percentage of roads in poor or worse condition. Also included in the report in the first couple pages is a chart that just shows the breakdown by community and also the MPO planning area as a region, the pavement conditions for each jurisdiction. Also note that for jurisdictions such as the counties that overlap with and go outside of the MPO planning area, only the road segments that are within the planning area have been included in this analysis. Next slide. New to this report this year, we break out the average PCI by road classification using the federal functional classification. Traditionally, we just lump all of this information into one number, but we thought it was important to show just the difference in PCI by road type. Traditionally, you see higher classified roads such as major arterials and minor arterials being in a little bit better condition than your local roads, and this just illustrates that. Also new to the report is a individualized page for each community that takes all the information in the first couple pages that looks at the region as a whole and breaks that down by community as a comparison to the region, just as a benefit to some communities who may look at this data a little less closely than we do. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions about the pavement condition report.
Andrew, thank you. Any questions for Andrew? I hear none. Item number 11 is a report on the transload facility from Zach.
Yes, just want to give you a quick update on where we're at with the transload facility development. Staff has completed all the pre-reimbursement requirements from the FRA. These are the requirements that we had to meet before Des Moines Industrial could start requesting reimbursements. So those have been completed. So Des Moines Industrial can start submitting those reimbursements at any time. They've indicated that they probably won't submit their first one until probably March 2021, unless there's some change in the weather and they're able to start getting groundwork in sooner. But we're anticipating that somewhere around March, they'll submit that first reimbursement request for build grant funds. Our most recent quarterly report was due at the end of the month. We submitted that to the FRA and they've approved that. Des Moines Industrial is currently wrapping up their agreements with the railroads and the city of Des Moines. They're tentatively scheduled to have those agreements all wrapped up next week, they think on January 26th. And that would put them in a position to begin construction in March of 2021. On the slide before you here is a tentative schedule of activities for the rest of the year. You can see that the bulk of construction is scheduled for starting, in March, April, and going through November before the project closes out later in the end of the year. Most all the construction should be completed, substantially completed in 2021. There will be some administrative tasks that will probably bleed over into 2022, but we're anticipating that the facility will be on the ground at the end of this year. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Zach, thanks. Any questions for Zach?
Councilman Gatto, this is Mayor Sarah Kurowski, and I'm not sure if I want to direct this at Zach or if Scott Brennan is on. You know, I had quite a few questions in the month of November and December via exec, and the staff and legal got back to me on all of those. But I think it would be good for the rest of policy to understand and hear articulated from Scott about the important steps that were put into place at the end of December in regards to working with the bank, the bond, and how hopefully, should we ever be in a position we need to partner with the bank on a new contractor, what that looks like. I just know that not everybody has been in that conversation, and I think the policy committee would appreciate knowing the work that went on.
And
That
this
sounds
is Scott.
great.
I'm happy to address. I'm happy to address it if you'd like, and Zach, correct me where I get off the rails. But we worked with the lender for Des Moines Industrial to preserve for the MPO the right to have a seat at the table in the event that Des Moines Industrial were to default on their loans, meaning that because the contract is between the MPO and the agencies, it was important, I think, that the MPO has the expertise in order to keep this project moving forward. So that was one piece that was completed. Additionally, there was a construction bond secured by the builder, which would be the Ryan companies, and so that will guarantee that the project continues. And then, and finally, I think another issue that I believe we resolved was that we reviewed the method in which Des Moines Industrial picked the construction company, which was what they call a construction manager at risk model. And we asked for Des Moines Industrial to provide a legal opinion to justify their use of that methodology. They provided an opinion. And then I and my firm reviewed that opinion and did independent research, and were comfortable that the construction manager at risk model was an appropriate one to select the construction manager. I think those were the primary issues. Is that right, Zach?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you, Scott. I think you summarized what I viewed as a tremendous amount of work very quickly. And I just want to make sure that policy knows that there's a lot of work that has been going on to make sure that everything is going well. And I just appreciate what we did in November and December.
Thank you.
Mayor Kurowski, thank you very much. Those were some very good questions you asked last month, and we appreciate the input from staff. They did a good job of getting it answered. And Scott, you as well, reviewing all the documents. So I think we've got a lot of the questions answered, policy questions specific to the transload and other bill grant things that we've got to work on in the future. And we're going to continue to move forward with the transload and with other projects. And just want to thank everybody for working hard and getting this done. Item number 12, unless there's any more comments. Item number 12 is report on the Purple Heart Highway update from Todd.
Thank you. Just quick background, the update on the redesignation report was completed back in October. We made some revisions in November. The conclusions were essentially the same, but the costs have come down significantly due to different design criteria now being used along the corridor. Next slide. So some of our next steps, the cost went from, 34 million down to about 1 million, and that's mainly for signage changes. Some of the next steps for our group is the DOT had sent a letter to the MPO asking to create a task force to kind of take this project to the finish line. And that is in the process of being formed. Tony Gustafson, the District 1 engineer, asked Andy Lunan to help coordinate that activity with the MPO staff. So we're starting that process of getting that pulled together. Farm Bureau, we want to talk with them. They've been brought along in this process, but we're working on scheduling a meeting hopefully next month with some of their board members. And we've contacted the governor's office to set up a meeting with the governor to talk about that. I think there's one more slide. Oh, sorry. So we're in the process of setting up several meetings to continue the discussion and work with the DOT through the remaining process. And there's a couple legislative items that need to take place at the state level, as well as an exemption at the federal level that we'll have to work through as we get through the redesignation process. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Todd, thank you. Any questions?
This is Sarah again, more a question / comment. Todd, has everyone on policy received the talking points regarding Purple Heart Highway or only exec?
So far, only exec has received them, and then we got a couple comments that we've revised that document just today from the DOT, and Stephanie Riva also had a little comment that we tweaked. So we'll be resending that out to exec, and we can send that out to the whole policy committee at the same time.
Okay, I think it would be really great because we have a very well-connected, powerful group here sitting at policy, and I want to make sure that everyone has the talking points and the information. We are in the middle of legislative session. I doubt anything's going to happen this year because we're a little late to the table, but there was some pre-work going on with a lot of state house reps, and so I've already received some phone calls, and I know a few others have, saying, hey, what's happening? What are you doing? Where's this going? So I want to make sure, should anyone else on policy be contacted, that they have the talking points and can speak to it as well.
Yeah, we'll get that sent out later today to everyone on policy.
Thanks.
Thank you, Todd. Item number 14 is report on water trails update, or 13, a water trails update from Todd.
Yeah, thank you. We continue work on this project. The design work's continuing on schedule. The NEPA work is continuing on schedule. We've gotten a couple reviews done by the Corps of Engineers on the 408 and 404, some initial comments on those permits, which is great to get that feedback already in place. The build grant during the appropriations bill that was passed last month to continue funding the government. It also extended the deadline on 2019 build grants, which is what the Water Trails build grant is. That extends the obligation deadline to September 30th of next year. The team is proceeding on the original schedule, though, just to make sure we get this project done in a timely manner. The deadline extension just gives us a little breathing room if it's needed. The agreement between the agreement between the MPO and Federal Highway has been drafted and is in DC being reviewed. We're working on an agreement between the MPO and the DOT. And then agreements between the MPO, Central Ohio Water Trails, and the City of Des Moines are underway and starting to take shape. Those will all come back to this committee for review and approval before they're completed. Okay, next step. Design plans will be submitted in February. Final plans in March, and then submittal to the DOT in May, and then a bidding kind of in late summer, early fall. Then construction would start next year, potentially. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Todd? And Todd, as we go through this, it's important that I think the full policy committee knows that, we hold the build grant. We're responsible for the construction.
Yep.
That ultimately, I know there's been construction or discussion with the county.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us an update on that?
Sure. Yeah, the MPO, since it was the applicant and the recipient of the build grant, is responsible for the build grant. We'll hold a construction contract. We're going to be partnering with Polk County, Bob Rice's team, primarily on them being the construction manager of the project, and then they're subbing out some of the construction engineering work that will be managing the day-to-day activities of the construction contract. And then all that's reported back up through Bob and his team and up to the MPO and staff, and then to our board. So that's how that process is working. We're working out the particulars on that right now.
Excellent. Any other questions, comments? It's an exciting project. We'll keep moving forward. Item number 14 is a report on legislative update from Dylan.
Thank you. I have a couple updates for you here. One on the legislative side, as Todd just mentioned late last month, there was the appropriations bill that was passed. There's actually two bills kind of coupled together, one related to COVID recovery and then the 2021 appropriations. Looking at them more holistically, a couple of things happened. They did appropriate money for another round of build, $1 billion for another round of build. There was economic relief provisions put into the COVID bill. There was $10 billion put out for STBG funds, which would apply to us. 10 billion went to US DOT, and the law stipulated that 15% of that had to go to MPOs over 200,000. Just yesterday, we got the allocations of what those would be for each MPO, and our number was about $4.5 million. We're verifying this with the Iowa DOT to make sure that it's that number, that everything's correct there, but expect to see some amount around there that we will have extra to allocate to our members. And that amount is 100% federal. There's no local match required to that. There's also money put forth for public transportation and airports. I know Elizabeth's on. I don't know if DART has received what their exact number is, but they will receive something as well. And I assume the Des Moines Airport in addition. And then lastly, as Todd just mentioned, the build grant timeline for the 2019 grants was extended out by a year. So that's kind of a snapshot of what was included with that COVID/appropriations bill. Moving on to state update, a couple things at the state level are going on. One that's kind of interesting is House Study Bill 25, which relates to personal delivery devices, or PDDs. This is kind of a new term, and some states are dealing with this. But essentially, it creates a code chapter that would allow for and regulate the use of these personal delivery devices. And there's a photo of one of what these look like up there on the screen. They're essentially autonomous little robots that work on the sidewalks to deliver goods to people. So think of a restaurant maybe delivering something, or in most likely the case here, a company like Amazon wanting to use this to deliver packages. The way that the law is written, it would be restricted to pedestrian areas with a max speed of 12 miles per hour. If there's no sidewalk or if there's no pedestrian zone, it could go out on the road, but at a max speed of 20 miles per hour or the speed limit, whichever's less. And there's a lot of language in there of how they'd have to yield to traffic and not block the right of way and that sort of thing. There's weight limits put in there along with the speed. It does say that local jurisdictions could regulate these devices as well, as long as they're not inconsistent with the bill. At a meeting a few days ago, the state has an autonomous transportation readiness committee, essentially. This bill was discussed, and the Iowa DOT staff said that they are opposed to this bill in current form. If you look at the lobbyist declarations, they're shown as undecided, but that's because the DOT can't go be opposed to a bill without the governor's approval. But they said as staff, they are opposed to this bill, and they're working through this. It sounds like Amazon is the one that has introduced this bill, or someone from Amazon has shopped this around to several states, including Iowa. That's where this is coming from. Some of these are in place around the country. The University of Wisconsin apparently has these on their campus and just running around. So there are examples of these in other states, and now it's coming to Iowa apparently. The next one, this is another state-related bill, more on the stormwater watershed management side of things. The Iowa Home Builders Association is proposing a bill that would basically not allow a city or a county to do anything that's above and beyond the state or federal requirements as it relates to stormwater runoff, discharge, retention, and so forth. This bill has not yet been introduced, at least as of a little bit ago, but it sounds like it's making its way through the process and will be introduced here soon. I know the Metro managers talked about this at their meeting the other day. League of Cities and others are aware of this and working on it, but just wanted to make you aware as well. Those are the main updates I have. If there's any questions about any of this or any feedback, be happy to take that from you.
Dylan, thanks. Kevin Foley is on the line, and so is Elizabeth. Maybe they could give us an update if they know how much they're going to receive out of any of that funding.
Sure, I'd be happy to. This is Kevin Foley. We don't know absolutely yet. We have some information from the FAA, but they haven't released the actual location. By my calculation, it should be about $3.9 million out of that $2 billion that Des Moines would receive.
Great. Elizabeth, is there an update from you?
Yep. Hi, this is Elizabeth. We're anticipating as part of the second CARES Act that we'll receive about $3.3 million.
Okay. All right. Item 16 is other non-action items. Todd, I think you've got one. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped Gunner.
Yeah.
Hey, Gunner.
Hello, everyone. Have a few upcoming events to make sure that you are aware of. The Iowa Safe Routes to School Conference coming up later this month, next week, in fact, free and online all day. This leads up to the Iowa Bicycle Summit on the subsequent days of the 29th and 30th. A couple of tracks here for a couple of different price points, depending on whether you're going for CE or going as an advocate. Also want to draw your attention to a program being put on by Smart Growth America about equity and improving racial equity, economic inclusion, and restorative justice through smart growth, also next week. Locally, the Greater Des Moines Leadership Institute, in partnership with several local organizations, is offering the Then, Now, and Win series. This is kind of leadership training to help close the racial equity gap in the Greater Des Moines region. More information and registration is online at the site there, but this is 8 sessions between now and April, culminating with a keynote by Nicole Hannah-Jones, the creator of the 1619 Project. Also, some rain garden training coming up as part of the rain campaign this next month on the 11th and 12th. Range of topics, anything that you might want to do related to retaining rain on your property. Finally, just saving a date at this point, don't have much details beyond this, but April 14th for the Beyond the Bus Summit with the topic of inclusion yet again. That's it for me, unless you have any questions. Wait, I'm sorry, one more. Also, another save the date for September 22 or through 24 for the partnership DC trip.
All right. Gunner, thank you. Any questions for Gunner? Item 16 is other non-action items of interest to the committee. Todd, I believe you have one of them.
Yes. It's that time of year again for the sub areas to make their appointments to the executive committee. We'd like those by the end of January, or at least the first week of February, so we can get those approved at the February meetings. Be happy to answer any questions. We did get the representatives from the Eastern area already, so appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And welcome to Elizabeth Thompson from Altoona. She's gonna take Kyle Merck's spot. So welcome to policy. And Kyle served for a long time, and he'll be missed. But my understanding, you're gonna do a great job and step right in. So welcome and happy to have you.
Thank you. I know he's left some very big shoes to fill.
Yeah. Anyone else have anything?
I just have one other thing, Joe, I wanted to mention real quick. The MPO is going to have its quadrennial certification review with FHWA and FTA in April. So you'll be seeing more information on that in the next couple months as we get closer to the last week of April. We'll have meetings with both those organizations going over the MPO's performance.
Excellent. And I know the review committee is reviewing you as our director, and I think we'll have a report for the exec next month. And then for our next meeting date is February 18th. I'm sure we'll have a recommendation for them at that time. And so our next meeting is February 18th at 4 o'clock. There's nothing else. This meeting's adjourned. Hopefully in a few months we can get back together. Maybe before the end of my tenure, we'll have in-person meetings. I don't know. We'll see.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Take care.